We were together in July to talk about a schedule for redistricting. We're required every 10 years to redistrict the magisterial districts of the county. And we have to do that in the year ending in 1. That's this year. And we need to make those district changes to reapportion the population among the various districts. And those changes have to be based on the U.S. Census. And it's important to note that what we're talking about here is redistricting the magisterial districts, and this has no effect whatsoever on any school district. This does not affect any school district, so any decision you make will have no effect on that. Just to go through the rules again very quickly of every redistricting. But again, this is a legally required process that the board and every other locality has to go through that has individual voting districts and not all at large. So the districts have to be contiguous. That's a roughly contiguous Maryland district, but they have to, which means it has to touch. Okay, all parts of the district have to touch. It has to be compact, which is a rough idea of trying to approximate something that looks like a square, something that looks like a circle, but we never get there, and no jurisdiction does. But all of our districts currently are considered compact under this rule, and the districts that we will be talking about in the proposal are as well. The boundaries of the magisterial districts have to have clearly observable boundaries. Rivers, streets, permanent features shown on specific maps. There are specific maps that under state law we are allowed to use to determine these boundaries. And finally, there has to be a so-called equal population. And that means that once we're done in changing the magisterial districts, that if you take the most populated and the least populated district, there has to be a deviation between those of less than 5%. Okay, right now we are in a situation where close to 14% deviation between the most populated and the least populated, which means we had the work to do that has been done. And speaking of the work that has been done, I first of all want to thank the board for participating with us in looking at various possibilities on how the districts can be redistricted to meet all of the criteria that I just talked about. But I also want to thank Logan Ashby, who's the senior automation analyst with budget and management, who set up all the programs to be able to look at the data which Census sent us and to be able to manipulate it so that we can actually come to the best way to redistrict the county. Meg Malik, the GIS specialist from IST, very helpful in this, and Natalie Spillman was sort of the lead behind this team. But I also want to thank Michelle Heilman, my senior paralegal, who put this presentation together as well, helped with that. So one other requirement for redistricting is when we redraw the magisterial districts, it can't result in either of these. One is racial vote packing or racial vote cracking. One is concentrating voters from a particular racial group into one district, which removes their ability to influence voting in surrounding districts, while at the same time not breaking voting blocks in a district into multiple districts, and therefore watering down or diluting voting. Okay, so that's a real tightrope act, and we talked about that before. The proposal that we have come up with, I think, balances out all of the factors that we have talked about up to now. We got the census data extremely late, roughly 6 months later than normal, which is the reason why we're doing this now and not much earlier in the year. This data gives us total population, voting age populations, racial populations, and housing unit data. There's a lot of data that comes from census, and we have all that now in the system. We know that we've grown on average throughout the county 15.5% since 2010, and our total population is 365,306. And that's in 138, 691 housing units. So that's again, we have grown quite a bit, but that growth, of course, has not been proportional between the districts, which is why we have to redistrict. So let's go on to the proposal. This is a chart showing what we started with. This is from the 2020 census results and our current magisterial district lines. And as you can see, Matoka grew at the highest proportion, and then there were other magisterial districts, particularly Dale and Clover Hill, that in relation to the other districts grew at a lower rate. Now, everybody grew, but in proportion to the other districts, this is the distribution. So you can see that we've got a distribution between 591 and 893, so roughly 14%. And that's what we had to deal with. So here are the current lines, the current magisterial district lines. And based on lots of discussions individually with you all and running numbers, running census blocks, we've come up basically with 4 changes that could be made under this proposal, that if these 4 changes were made, you would satisfy all of the legal requirements for redistricting. And I'm gonna go through these things individually. I'll start from the east. So I'll start kind of at the southern portion, or the eastern portion, let's call it, of Clover Hill and Midlothian, and the northern part of Dale. So there are 2 different segments of property that we would propose go to Dale, one from Clover Hill, one from Midlothian. And the one from Midlothian is this little piece that is bounded by Walmsley Boulevard to the north and Belmont Road to the south, and that is close to Chippenham Parkway. Right to the west of that is this, which is the Manchester voting precinct currently. And the proposal is that go from Clover Hill to Dale. That will smooth out the line really between Clover Hill, Midlothian, and Dale. Okay, and then those adjustments then would require some other adjustments. This is really to account for the fact that Matoka has to give up property. Okay, it has to give up voters because it grew at a rate so much higher than the rest of the districts. So there were a number of voters that had to come from Matoka from somewhere. This would and Clover Hill correspondingly needs to pick up additional people. What I just talked about basically takes care of Dale. This would take care of Clover Hill and Matoka simultaneously. And this is basically the property that is a large portion of Wood Lake and going up into what's called the Cambria Cove area. So that would actually then go to Clover Hill from Matoka. And then the final change, which it does not seem to want to do, there it is. This is way to the west. The western boundary of this is actually the Powhatan line, and the southern boundary there is Genito Road, the eastern boundary being Otterdale, and the northern boundary is existing Midlothian. This looks like a lot of territory, and it is, but this is not a largely populated area that doesn't move a lot of voters, but it moves some voters to help balance out what we talked about, the portion of Midlothian going to Clover Hill. Okay, so those are the 4 changes, roughly. And what those 4 changes in this proposal would do is give us a deviation or distribution between the most populated and least populated of under 5%, just a little over 4%. So that would solve that issue in the redistricting. The other issue that, again, to be cognizant of is what is the change in our racial and cultural population numbers. And the nice thing about these changes is that for each change in each district, and I want to point out right now, I have not talked about Bermuda at all, and that is because this proposal does not have Bermuda moving at all. Okay, so there would be no, we looked at some possibilities of moving population, and in particular, we actually looked at what would happen if a portion of Bensley went to the Dale District from Bermuda, but it was ending up dividing a neighborhood in half, and we didn't have to make that change, so at least this proposal does not have any change to Bermuda. So the change to the Dale District, if you look at the bar chart, you're looking at various racial populations and cultural populations. The change between 2000 and what this proposal would do. And as you can see, I'm just going to run through Dale, Clover Hill, and if you look at the top of the bar, of those bars, you can see there's virtually no appreciable change in the percentages within any of the racial or cultural categories. So that basically addresses the whole idea of dilution or packing of racial populations. So let me go back. Someone give me that slide. Yeah, actually, this is perhaps the most important slide. This proposal is on your agenda for later today to set a public hearing for October 27th. And you need to hold a public hearing on this. Today, and I've heard that it is already up, there is a active public comment portal that is open on the website. You can go and see the maps and all of the forms at chesterfield.gov/census. And then there are 2 community meetings that we are scheduling that will be hosted via Facebook Live. 6 o'clock meetings, one on the 13th and one on the 19th. And I think the first one is going to be, if I'm not mistaken, is Mr. Holland and Mr. Winslow are hosting that meeting, and Mr. Carroll and Ms. Ailey, the subsequent one on 10/19. So those community meetings will be held to get any other input. So we'll have all the inputs from the comments, so the comment period is open. The community meetings will be held, and then we'll hold the public hearing on the 27th on this proposal. So that's all I have on that subject.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mincks. And so the citizens will have an opportunity to comment via online form via the website. Is that correct?
Correct.
Just want to confirm that citizens have the opportunity who may not visit the Facebook Live, but they can comment.
Yes.
In addition to that.
That's correct.
Online. Very good.